So your terrific TEDx talk. What's a TEDx? Hear some of you say. Do you know, my brother didn't even know what one was. He'd never heard of it. I was like, are you living under a rock? No, so he's just not into that kind of thing. I'll tell you what a TEDx talk is. It's a showcase for speakers presenting a great, well-formed idea between 3 and 18 minutes. That's what it is. It's an idea worth spreading. And it's usually performed in front of a live studio audience, a live audience of between 100 and who knows. And it's also videoed. And that video can live on in perpetuity because, of course, once it's on the internet, that's it. It's there forever. And some people want to do it because it's on their bucket list. They just think, yeah, I want to do a TEDx talk. That's part of my legacy. Some people want to do it because they've got a burning idea that they want to share and they've got to get it out there. And some people want the experience of standing on stage in front of a bunch of strangers. Some people look for those kind of experiences. I'm just going to throw some background into the picture before I give you the top tips for the actual speech itself. I just think it would be useful for you to know some of the behind the scenes stuff. I've delivered 2 TEDx events, TEDxTelford in 2018 and 2019, and I've coached over 40 TEDx speakers. So it's kind of a sideline I do alongside my neurodivergent stuff. So let's have a look at what's what. What is a TEDx event? Well, it's an event that has a very broad theme. You're not allowed as an event organizer to make it too prescriptive. So I couldn't put on a TEDx event that was all about autism, for example. It's too tight. It needs to be super broad. Any subject can come along, and they just need to sort of fit in with the theme loosely. So what next? Super broad. Not business as usual. Again, could be any subject. And your talk needs to be quite well formed before you even apply. That's what I want to kind of put out there, and we'll talk more about that later. There'll be a crew. It's all done voluntarily. There's no fee paid to the licensee, organizer, or any of the crew. You literally have to balance your books. The first event I put on cost us £8,000 in total, and we luckily brought in £8,000. So I broke even, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. It's supposed to cost you nothing, but be a fantastic thing. We had to find a venue. We had to take it from here to here and dress it into a proper stage with the good old red spot on it. We even had to build the sign. We literally had to get it all cut out. We knew someone who had a CNC machine. So sometimes it's who you know, not what you know. And we had to paint it all up, create it, get a card machine, made our own red dot, add some vinyl, because I didn't want to trip over a lumpy carpet or a rug. So I wanted something very flat to the floor. I'm all about the details, you know. And we needed to get sponsors. We had to reach out to the networks that we knew, places like this, where we're like, hey, everybody, do you want to be a sponsor of a TEDx event? Because you're going to feature on every single video, and that's going to go out to the world, because you feature at the beginning and the end of every single speaker's video, which is pretty cool. Plus, you're there in the room, as you can see on that slide. So, and you're in the program and you're on the website. You know, there's really good exposure opportunities as a business for sponsoring a TEDx event, just worth knowing. We also had to make sure we got some good quality video and photography, because that's what's going to be the legacy in perpetuity. Unfortunately, that does cost about £3,000 for the day, but it's worth it to get the quality. And we made sure that we had a goodie bag. Who doesn't love a goodie bag? But it wasn't full of crappy old leaflets from everybody. We made sure it was tangible, good stuff. It was bottles of water, which we then changed into a reusable, recyclable bottle. And then we had some filtered water on hand so you can refill at your leisure. So we were thinking much more eco. And we had chocolates in there to keep people's energy up, and a lovely little leather-bound notebook from one of the sponsors, and we made a program. So we wanted the audience to have a really lovely experience. They paid 57 quid for their ticket. They get a goodie bag. They get lunch, they get refreshments, and they get, at the time, 15 TED Talks throughout the day. So yeah, I wanted people to think, wow, this is such great value for money. That's what it was all about for me as the licensee. So that's the event part. So let me just talk to you about speaker selection. Lots of questions I get about this. And that's how do you select your speakers? How does one apply that kind of stuff? So these are my speakers I had over the 2 events. And most of the organizers of TEDx will have some kind of application form. It might be a Google form, it might be on their website, or it's certainly usually accessible from their website. And they'll have very strict guidelines. They'll say, I want a 2-minute video. Well, don't go over 2 minutes. Some of the organizers are receiving 200 applications. What do you think is a really easy way to sift? People who can't follow the rules. Gone. So follow the rules, and that'll give you more than a fighting chance for actually going through and being considered. Some places that are putting on an event will have a speaker curator, and that curator will be making the decision about the speakers. Sometimes it's the licensee. Sometimes there won't be an application process, and they'll approach people and say, hey, do you want to come and speak at my TEDx? I had a speaker panel, which some places often do, and that meant that I had 7 people all viewing our 38 applicants. I only opened our window for 2 weeks because I haven't got time to go through 200. So we had 38 applicants. The panel that I had was a mixture of genders, age, ethnicity, all sorts of stuff. I was trying to really mix it up so that I had different views on how those pitches were landing. And then we sort of came out with a scoring, and that gave us our top group that we could work with. Not everybody does it that way, but I, as a Toastmaster, as I am, I had 14 Toastmasters apply to speak at my TEDx. Imagine how awkward that would have been if I was the single curator to tell them, sorry, you didn't make the cut. It's a lot easier when there's 7 people on the panel and I'm sorry, you didn't quite get enough on the scores. That just feels a bit less, Sam's decided you can't speak at her event kind of thing. So that was a good way of protecting myself as well. I made sure that there were rehearsals. And if you are speaking at a TEDx event and there are no rehearsals, that's a red flag. You need to rehearse. Absolutely, you need to rehearse. This is a talk you can't really do on the fly. If you're used to speaking on the fly, I speak on the fly quite a lot. I speak what's in my head. I'm doing it in this section right now, completely on the fly. I've got my pictures. I can speak to my pictures, but I don't have a script for this. Some people will have a script and they'll learn it verbatim. And some people will have some more of a framework, and they really know their subject, so they know what they're going to talk about. Both ways are okay, but don't just rely on your brain on the day. You still need to do some practice, run through what you think you're going to talk about, find out if you're likely to go down a rabbit hole. You won't have time. Remember, it's 3 to 18 minutes. So you're going to work on a speech that's about 15 minutes long, because you probably will go over. If you practice to 18 minutes, you won't have practiced necessarily in front of an audience. And if an audience laughs at what you say, or you want to do a dramatic pause or something like that, because it feels right in the moment, that's eating into that time. So I would say if you're going to do one, plan it for 15 minutes. Chances are it'll come out at 18 anyway. And there are books out there to help you, like TED Talks by Chris Anderson. He's the guy who runs TED in the USA. And there's another book, Talk Like TED by Carmine Gallo. If you like quite a long read about storytelling, that's it. If you want the short version, make sure you tell stories in your TEDx. Just saved you about 10 quid there. On the day, you just come dressed in your best. And I did a dress rehearsal the day before, so we all knew exactly how everything would work, all the tech, all the mics, where they're going to stand on stage, how it's going to feel, who's on next, where can they do their prep. We had a room behind that wall where people were able to kind of collect themselves before they went on stage. And slides that came up, they actually came up behind the person here on the wall. It was brilliant. It was so, big and impactful. This was at a university. This was the second one I put on. And yeah, very well received, and everybody had a good time, if a bit stressful. So let me talk about the talk part now. So I'm going to stop sharing and just talk for a little while. What is a TEDx talk? Well, yes, I've told you how long it is, and I've told you it's an idea worth spreading. But the reason why this short talk model works so well is because it demands the audience's attention for quite a short time. So in fact, actually, if you can do it even less than 18 minutes, even less than 15, maybe down to more like 10 to 12, you have a higher chance of your video being shared more often to a wider audience, if that's what you want to get your ideas spread. And some of the greatest TEDx or TED Talks even, and the difference between TEDx and TED is a TEDx is a locally organized event, and the licensee has to live in the postcode of the event. So I couldn't go to another town and run a TEDx there as a licensee. I can only do it in Telford because that's where I live, and my postcode is TF. I couldn't go to Wolverhampton, WV. I could go and help them on their crew, but I couldn't be the licensee. That's the way it works, to try and keep it local and stop people kind of going around the country putting events on as some sort of, I don't know why anyone would do that, but I'm sure there are people out there who would. And the TED event is the big conference that takes place usually in Northern America, and it costs $10,000 to apply to be in the audience. You don't even just buy a ticket, you have to apply. But then you could be rubbing shoulders with celebrities and influencers and scientific big brains of the day and all sorts of stuff. So they probably get rather a lot of applications, and they cherry pick who they want to be in the audience. So I don't have $10,000 to spend, plus the flights and all the rest of it. So I just watch it on YouTube. It's a lot cheaper. So what's a great, well-formed idea? It can either be something that's new and surprising, or an idea or an invention that your audience has probably never heard about, which is hard, really hard to be original in this day and age. It's been a lot of thought over the years. Or it could be a really great basic idea, and it might be that the audience has already heard about it, but it might have a compelling new twist or an argument or a view or application or something like that. It might challenge their beliefs or perspectives. So it doesn't have to be completely unique. It can be a new take on something. And some people will use a survival story to say, and this is what I learned. That happens a lot. You don't really want your event, your TEDx event, just to be 15 survival stories, because that's going to get very tiring to watch. You want a bit of performance. You want perhaps a bit of poetry, a bit of dance, a bit of music. That's all included. You might have a survival story in there. You might have somebody talking about Easter Island. You might have someone talking about eggs. These are subjects that my people were talking about. Someone was talking about marketing. Someone else was talking about the ethics of business, all sorts of stuff. So the variety is very important, and that's what TEDx curators or licensees are looking for. So don't be ordinary. I'm sure none of you are, but don't be ordinary. And the idea isn't just a list of stories or a list of facts or anything like that, but the story part is really important, because just like we were saying earlier, how important case studies are for your business, stories are pretty much the same as case studies. We've been telling stories since we could communicate as a species, and we love stories. So they're a really great vehicle for carrying our message. So if we can weave a story in, it's likely to be more memorable, more powerful, and long living. We want that. So you could have a big idea. It could be a technical demonstration of something perhaps you've developed. Like I said, it could be a performance, music, dance, that kind of stuff. It could be some kind of artist statement or performance piece. You could dazzle people with wonder, with something that's like a discovery moment. You could have a really tiny, small idea, but it's got a big world impact. Or it could be talking about an issue in a way that perhaps other people haven't talked about it before. So there's lots of different ways that you can use words, information, language, etc., to make a rich experience for the viewer. So be quick and concise with things like your introduction. You don't want to waffle on for ages. Don't dance around your main idea. Get on with it. Really focus on the audience. It's not about you. It's all about the audience. So you want to use you statements and not make any assumptions about the audience either. Remember, the people who are watching your video are going to be potentially from anywhere in the world. English is probably not their first language. So you have to make it understandable. I mean, if you speak like Stephen Fry, I'm not saying dumb it down, but you might want to relax your language a little bit, or perhaps explain some of the more complex words, phrases, ideas, that kind of thing, just so that it levels it and people can understand what you're saying, because you don't want it to go over their heads. I would clearly state your idea. Don't try and hide it. Don't try and be clever. Let's be quite obvious, because we want people to understand what we're saying. And you'll still need some evidence to back up what you're saying. It can't just be one fluffy story. You're going to need a bit of science. You can't use things like a stream of anecdotes to back up your story. You actually need some kind of evidence. It could be stats that you've built. It could be clients that you've worked with and you've created some kind of stats based on the clients you've worked with. That's real life evidence. You don't have to work with 1,000 clients to get that. You could just work with 10 and say 7 out of 10 clients I work with did this. And this is what I learned. That's the truth. That's a fact. And it's from your experience. No one can argue with your experience. And if you can focus on some fresh new information, that's the little nugget of wonderful. If you do need to include basic information just for understanding, just keep it brief. Try not to go on and on about something. And if you can, acknowledge and politely address any kind of contradictions that you think might be out there. So you could be like, so now you might have doubts about this, and I'm sure these might be the reasons why you've got doubts. So let me address those. So that's a really great way of telling the audience, I understand that this is quite a challenging ask for you to be on board about this topic, subject, idea, and you're just letting them know I've considered these things. I'm not just, you know, rose-colored specs. I don't just think, oh, this is a great idea, and I haven't considered everything else. And that will allow the audience to trust you more and be more confident in you. And we all want that. And at the end, you want to end on a high note of some kind. So you will need some kind of structure. And when you're writing your TEDx, I would recommend that you start with the end in mind. What do you want to leave them with in your conclusion, wrap up, call to action, whatever you want to call it? Then you work out what you need in the middle to support that idea at the end, that thing you leave them with. And then it'll be a lot easier to write your introduction. A lot of people hover over the page going, ooh, how do I start? It's much easier if you do it back to front. So in that conclusion, you want to leave them with a sense of positivity towards you and the idea, because, you know, they connect the two of you together. And some kind of call to action is very positively received. What do you want the audience to do now? Now they've heard you. Do you want them to think about something, tell other people, buy something, reduce something, change the way they do something? So they're ready to receive your instruction at that point. It's a really powerful moment where you can be very influential. And I would perhaps avoid trying to sell anything. TEDx and TED don't really like that. So I wouldn't kind of go, and so if you want to learn more about this, you can get my book. They really don't like stuff like that. People will look you up. If they like your TEDx, if you've got a website, hopefully you're easy to find, maybe on LinkedIn, they'll find your book. But it's not a selling opportunity at all. It's an opportunity to share your ideas and show off your expertise. Because for those moments, those minutes, you are the expert in the room. You can use props, you can use slides, you can use body language. You want to wear something quite simple. Lots of people go for the kind of the TED colors. And remember, when you're speaking in the room, you are speaking to the audience. It's a live gig. The video is incidental. You're not speaking to the video. That's really important. And it will come over so much better if you are speaking to the live audience and they're just capturing it on video. I promise you. So hopefully with all of those tips, you've got a really good idea whether or not you want to do one, or how you might get around doing your TEDx speech. And that's it. Back to you, Peter.